Guys, I just found out. My parents make more money than I do. You're 17 and unemployed. I don't care. I'm joining Occupy Wall Street. Income inequality in the United States has been a huge topic of debate for the past few years, especially as recent events like the coronavirus pandemic have made it a lot worse. And whether or not you can feel its effects personally, it does fundamentally impact your life. Obviously, with it being an economic issue, it has far-reaching economic impacts that everyone feels. But there are social and political consequences too, and even though it's easy to see them today, we have to go back to the colonial times to understand the full story of income inequality in US history. The southern colonies were settled largely by plantation farmers because the climate was well suited to grow cash crops. Plantations were scattered few and far between, and very rich plantation owners initially employed very poor indentured servants before moving to slaves who didn't get paid at all. By contrast, the New England colonies were settled in towns and developed trade-based societies with more equal distributions of wealth and income. Oh, well, guess it's geography's fault. Not exactly. Fiddlesticks! Over time, the reasons behind income inequality have changed. With the rise of transportation and communication in the 19th century, the markets became more accessible to everyone. Industrialization also drastically changed the American economy, promoting urbanization by drawing large numbers of workers into wage-paying manufacturing jobs. At this point, the main drivers to economic inequality shifted away from the settlement patterns that defined the early development of the US and towards the more modern causes related to wage discrepancies. A very pro-business government and loose financial system, especially in the post-Civil War Gilded Age, exacerbated the already growing economic inequality that would define the US in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. But things did change. The progressive era of the 1900s, spearheaded by figures like Presidents Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, saw the government begin to regulate businesses and implement progressive income taxes, while reform movements worked to improve the condition of the poor. Unions also began to make progress and demanded higher wages, supported by decreases in the government's support of business. But even those were limited in how much they could reduce inequality. And right after the First World War, politicians made a return to normalcy that ended the progressive era, deregulated businesses, and reinvigorated the growth of income inequality. The ensuing Roaring '20s were a decade's worth of great economic growth that culminated in the greatest event of them all, the Depression. And with that, people who were sick and tired of the laissez-faire government voted a progressive back into the presidency. This new president, Franklin Roosevelt, began to grow the government in ways not seen before through his famous New Deal programs, investing large amounts into infrastructure projects and employment programs while also enacting financial reforms and tax increases. And the New Deal era continued through the Second World War into the 1950s and 60s, seeing expansions under President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs. It seemed like income inequality was slowly coming to an end until people got fed up with progressives for a variety of reasons, and elected a very conservative president named Ronald Reagan, who cut taxes, cut regulations, and cut spending, except on the military. And with that, income inequality skyrocketed, and that level of inequality continues today. You can see that change in the Ginny Index, which measures the difference between a real-world income distribution and a perfectly equal income distribution. Since Reagan's election, those numbers have risen from somewhere in the mid-30s in 1980 to the 40s by today. Guess I get to scapegoat the government for my troubles then. Cut the crap. You're unemployed because you said you're too busy with school. Freak on a stick! Anyway, today's income inequality is 1, greater than before, and 2, caused by a variety of factors. Like we were saying before, politics did and still do play a large role. But other underlying reasons are easy to see. The transition to a global economy and the rise of free trade has allowed firms to move their production centers to areas where it's cheapest to manufacture their products. Unfortunately for American workers, it's more expensive to manufacture stuff in the US, so lots of them were laid off as their employers moved production out of the country. Cheaper products equal more revenue for those who produce them, so the owners of those firms got richer. On the other hand, unemployment takes away income, so the workers who used to work for those firms got poorer. More inequality. Another large cause of inequality is the stock market. Firms issue stocks to finance their investment spending, which grows the economy. However, the trading of already issued stocks on the stock market does not grow the economy. Firms don't produce more when their stock prices increase. Combine that with the fact that business executives get stock options as pay and therefore run their businesses to increase stock prices instead of wages, and you get a sticky situation where only those able to afford stocks get richer off of businesses, while those who aren't, they don't see their wages rise as much. More inequality. Fine, I guess it's my fault that I don't make as much as my parents do. But why should I care? You shouldn't, because you're still under 18 and your parents pay for you. What the flip? But you should care about the increasing level of income inequality in society. From a purely economic perspective, income inequality hurts economic growth because wealthy people save more of their incomes instead of buying things and giving firms money to make more stuff with. With more of the money in the hands of the wealthy and less of it in the hands of the less wealthy, more money is going to be saved instead of spent. But society pays the price of inequality in other ways too. Lots of economists blame income inequality as a significant driver of the political polarization that we see in the country today. The shrinking of the middle class and stagnating wages are widely considered the reasons of the rise of the populist politicians, similar to how populists rose during the Gilded Age. Meanwhile, small numbers of people holding large amounts of money disproportionately affect politics. This all contributes to a trend of democratic backsliding and increasing authoritarianism. And that brings us into the proposals that people have made to solve income inequality. Many populists support proposals like giving a universal basic income, raising the minimum wage, and public medical insurance. Politicians like Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang have risen to the national stage by riding the increasing demand for these kinds of policies in the last few years. But there's also strong opposition to populist economic policies, hence why the government hasn't been able to implement them. On the other hand, one policy mindset that is more universally supported is strengthening education, because it's seen by pretty much everyone as a key to social mobility and self-improvement. But even that's plagued by disagreements among policymakers on how education should be improved. At the end of the day, it's hard to say what the solution to income inequality is. The fact of the matter is that it's not going to completely go away. But that's okay. Some people earn more than others because they provide more real value to society. The entrepreneurs who many look up to do just that. So yes, rising income inequality is a problem that everyone should be worried about. But it's also hard to argue for a world without income inequality. And the degree to how much income inequality should exist is really up to you to decide. Well, fudge. My parents just kicked me out for running away and now I'm in a homeless shelter.